you and I both value project-based learning. I'm wondering, it's kind of like a two-parter, when you would encourage a CS educator to engage in PBL and when you would not recommend PBL.
I would say PBL is a great framework. I don't know that I would use it 100% of the time. And I think there's elements of it that are great, but they can kind of be teased out. A lot of PBL uses cooperative learning, which I think it's the Kagan, I forgot, but they've done a lot around cooperative learning and basically setting up these team building, group building activities to again build this trust. And so I see that as something that should be in every single classroom. Your students should come in and trust each other. They should trust you. I don't see that as a missing element from any classroom. I do think some topics, some content, is easily explained in different ways. The constant struggle, at least what I hear from teachers I've seen, is this matter of efficiency. I'm like, Justin, we have to go through all of this stuff, and how can we allow PBL to do it? And I think that's kind of the fun part of designing a curriculum that is PBL. It's like balancing the need for efficiency, but then also the need for student understanding. Like we could go on one end of the spectrum, like full PBL all the time, and we can get some really, really deep learning going on. But we're probably not going to be covering a lot of other things because we're so deep and we're using that time appropriately. And then, on the other end of doing efficiency, lecture, direct instruction, rote memorization, whatever it may be, that's like, we're only hitting surface level, but we can hit a ton of topics because, the easiest way or the fastest way for information to be conveyed is just telling it to someone. And so that's where you're having to balance. And so I would encourage, if it's a teacher that has never done PBL before, find a unit out there, create one. I would say find one and try it in your classroom. See how it works in your classroom. See if it works with the topic. I think that's a great opportunity to learn a lot about your own teaching style, about how your students respond to it, and then start looking more from there. I think, rushing in and trying to overhaul your entire classroom in 1 year is a very lofty goal. I really enjoyed, there was a book, I forget the authors, but it was Hacking Project-Based Learning. It's a very short book, but it gives like 10 to 12 steps in there. And this is a very general approach to any classroom. 10 to 12 steps, case studies of how it worked. And then almost like this is what you can do today to do PBL stuff, like quick things. And then this is what you could do next year. And I can send you that link, Jared, because I think that's a wonderful book. And for any teacher that wants to jump into PBL, that would be a great way to do it.
Yeah, that advice definitely pairs nicely. I did an interview with John Stapleton a while back, and he was talking about how he was taught constructivist practices and pedagogies and thought that lecturing or any form of direct instruction was just like you should avoid at all costs. But then when he got into the classroom, he's like, oh, but there are moments where I need that. So it definitely is about finding that balance between different types of engagement and pedagogies and whatnot in the classroom.
Yeah, I would say, and I keep harping on it because I feel like it's so important. And I see it with adults, I see it with students, but setting up the trust and building that relationship, I think is key because you're going to find stuff that you want to try. And you, as a teacher, you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to be risky about things. And you can't be risky in front of your students if you don't trust that they're, not going to accept your failure as like, okay, well, guys, this obviously didn't work. Thanks for bearing through it with me. Or it could be one of the best lessons. But, teachers are never given that time to almost like field test their ideas, what they find. From that learning approach. And it's always like, well, this has to be a perfect thing, or, I'm robbing my students. No, like students understand they have bad days, they encounter failure, but building that relationship allows you to flex and go with what's going to be best for your students eventually.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. When I first started teaching music in a school district, the administrators were saying we don't have the opportunity or luxury to fail. And so they only wanted us to do things that we, quote, knew would work. And so we weren't encouraged to experiment with things. And for me, it did not connect with like the way that I am as an educator. I'm constantly iterating on what I'm doing. Every quarter, every day is something different. I mean, you just always have to be doing new stuff. This excerpt is from podcast number 23 of the CSK8 podcast, which is titled Project-Based Learning in Computer Science with Justin Cannady. You can listen to the full episode as well as hundreds more by searching for the CSK8 podcast on your favorite podcast app.